For today's class, so we'll be talking about the Azure architectures and some of the services. So last week we talked about, what the cloud computing is, what makes up the cloud computing, what are the cloud models, where we discussed the different type of models that we have, talking about the public, the private, and the hybrid. We also talked about some of the services, based on their categories, either they are IAAS, PAAS, or SAAS, where we gave an example that when you work with a virtual machine, a machine in the cloud, which we call a virtual machine in Azure, then we're talking about the IaaS because you are going to be managing a whole lot from the operating system of the machine to the files on there, to the patching, um, to the connections, even the login credentials and the likes, even the security. Now, we talked about the PaaS, which is the platform as a service, where you only manage the minimal part of that service, in the sense that the underlying infrastructure, maybe it's an infrastructure, maybe it's a virtual machine, or maybe is some other compute services, you will not have access to that information. You are only presented with a platform where you can actually manage maybe your code, your files, and the likes. And I gave a very good example, which is the Google Drive. We all make use of Google Drive, or let's say almost everyone here makes use of the Google Drive, or the OneDrive, or any other, cloud storage services provided by these all third-party organizations, where we're able to upload our files and folders, and regardless of where we are, regardless of the device we are accessing that Google Drive with, as far as you have an internet, once you try to access your Google Drive with the right credentials, you will have access to your files and folders. It's a platform that has been provided for us to manage, our files and folders. Then we talked about the SaaS, which literally is an application. We are not concerned about, the files now. We are not concerned about the folders. All these are actually being managed for us. All those emails that you can see on your Gmail, they're actually files, stored on a system. So, and these files are actually stored in a remote system, in a remote environment, which you do not have access to. So it's not as if, those emails are just there. They are not sitting on your phone. Yes, it's not as if you are doing a backup on your phone to retain the email. So tomorrow now, if you buy a new laptop, or if you purchase a new phone, you can still download all your emails. Then you are not going to lose any email, regardless of the system, the phone you are actually accessing that Gmail with. That email sits there. So you would look at it like, how does this work? So there is a file, or there are files sitting on a system which contains all those emails, and that's why, regardless of your location, regardless of the device you're working with, you are able to download those emails. So today we'll be going into details regarding some of the services that we have in Azure. This is not the category now. We are not talking about the PaaS, we're not talking about the SaaS. Now we are going into more details to check what are some of these services, that we have. One of the services we've talked about is the storage account, where I said you want to store your files and folders. You are only presented with the platform, like the Gmail, the Google Drive that we discussed. However, these files and folders are actually on a storage account, on an hard drive, just like the one we have on our system. But because you do not have access to that hard drive, you are only, you are only permitted to access a part of that hard drive. And that's why you have, if you check on your Google Drive, they will tell you you can upgrade to premium, but currently you have, a basic plan, which is just 15 gig. So you are only, how can I put it? You are only allowed to access 15 gig of that hard drive. But now we'll be talking about the storage account where you can actually decide, how many gig you want to create, how do you want to store your files and folders, what are the authentication protocols that you need to put in place if any user is trying to access that files and folders. So you can also decide how long, that files and folders can stay on that storage account. At this time, you are going to be managing, the underlying technology. The same thing goes with the machine, which is our computer system. Now, in the cloud, we call it a virtual machine because it's virtual, because you do not have access to the physical machine. However, it's the same computer system, it's the same laptop that you have, that you currently have. So that's one of the service. So we talked about some of the services. You will see different services categorized. So let's take a look at what we have for today. So the learning part, yeah, I'm sure by tomorrow we should be done with this learning part. Maybe at the end of tomorrow's class. So the learning parts, we have Azure architectural components, where we'll talk about the regions, the availability zones, the subscription and the resource group. What does all these terms means? Then we'll talk about the compute and networking, the compute types, the application hosting. Where we'll be looking at the hosting platform, just like the Ugos and the likes. However, we'll be talking about some of the services that are used in hosting these web applications, these websites. Um, the same thing, the same way all these GoDaddy present, that platform to us. So what are some of the underlying, technology or services that Azure have, to replace all these Google Drive and Ugos and, then we'll talk about the virtual networking. So we'll be looking at what is virtual about networking. Do we have, a cable in the cloud or something? Yes, we have cables in the data centers. We have cables, those cables that we find in our office are still in the data centers. Do we even, you know how, this our hold on, how our mobile technology works, how do we have access to mobile data. So, the Wi-Fi and the like that connections, the back end that is making these um, doable. And that's why we are able to at least connect to our devices, connect to our files and the like. So the same way we have the networking pictured in our on-prem environment, where we have some cables, for the guys that have been into networking before, all those switch, patch panel, and the likes, all those things are also in the data centers. We are not seeing them. So that's why we call them virtual. But you still need them to connect your services in Azure. Then we'll talk about the storage services, which we've given a very perfect example. The Google Drive, we talked about it, So we'll talk about the storage services that we have, the redundancy options, like how do we replicate? So should how do we make sure that these storage services is always available? Have you ever wondered why you never for once had an issue with Google Drive? Regardless of what time, once you have a working internet, you will always be able to access your file. Is it that now we are saying those files and folders are actually on the hard drive? What if there is an issue with that hard drive? Why am I still able to access it? What if there is an issue with the system? Are we saying for the past 10 years that I've been using Google Drive, they've never shut down that system? Yeah, they do. So that's when we talk about, the redundancy options. What are the replication strategies to make sure all your files and folders are always accessible at any point in time that you want to access it. So we'll talk about what are the things they do at the back end to make sure you will always have access to that hard drive, even when, you know, the files and folders, the computer system where you have put that files and folders maybe has been shut down. Some of those files, some of those hard drive will even be replaced, but you will not know because there are replication strategies, there are redundancy options that have been put in place. Then we'll talk about the file management and the migrations. Then we'll wrap it up with identity, access, and security. This is very, very important, when we'll talk about identity. So we'll look at what is identity, what is access and security. So you take yourself, your credentials. I was talking about the fact that when you want to access your Gmail, your Google Drive, whatever application you want to access, maybe Amazon or the likes, you'll be asked for your username and password. That username and password is what we call identity. That's your identity on that web app. So when I refer to identity, please just relate it with the fact that those are your credentials that you use in accessing, your web app, accessing your website or your account on any of those web apps where you've put in your accounts. Then yes, you can have a username and password. Then based on who you are, let's say on Amazon, we'll have some people working at the back end. Those ones will have access to back-end information, like the seller who is selling, a particular shoe. You will not have access to that same information. The thing you will have access to are your orders, your own information. So the access, these are permissions. We'll call it authorization. When I talk about authorization, you should relate it with permissions to say what can you access even when you have got your username and password. When you log into an application, what can you access? That's what that is talking about. Then we'll talk about the securities, some of the security which we've discussed. One common one that is the 2FA, the multi-factor authentication. Like when you try to access a particular application, yes, it gives you that benefit to put in your username and password. However, after that username and password, we now tell you we need you to still supply that code that has been sent to your email. Same way you're using your GTB account and you want to send money abroad. And when that amount is more than maybe 20,000 or specific amount, 50,000 or so, you'll be asked to supply, the number on your token device. That's what we call the 2FA, the multi-factor authentication. And that's why we say, when you are using, your Facebook account or your WhatsApp account, I still don't see reason why someone still don't have that 2FA activated to prevent unauthorized access to your account. Yes, you have the username and password. What if that username and password, someone has that username and password? So we always try to prevent unauthorized access, and that's where that security comes in. There are a lot of security services in Azure. This one you also might have witnessed is, let's say you want to browse a website or a web app, as we call it in Azure. You want to browse that website from Nigeria, and it tells you people from this region do not have access to this website. Yes, that's one of the services, in Azure in order to, enforce security. What we call that kind of service is conditional access. We are saying there are some certain conditions that must be met before this particular identity or this user can actually access this our website. When the user tries to access it from this location, you know, please block or restrict that user. So those are some of the security that are put in place. There are a lot more. We'll see those security services that are actually in place. So we'll talk about the directory services, which for now, don't worry about all these technical jargons. Then we'll talk about the authentication method, which I've given a very good example, which is the 2FA, the MFA, the token and the likes. Then we'll talk about the security models. So let's start looking at, some of the things. The first thing is the Azure account. The first thing is the Azure account, for you to be able to access the Azure portal, I'm going to be sharing some things. Kindly hold on. Okay, so the first one is the Azure account. Yeah, so I'm going to start to access the Azure account. To access that, we need to, log into the portal.azure.com. Sorry. Uh, so sorry, I don't want to. This is going to log me automatically to. I don't want that. Okay. So I'm going to use the incognito. So to access your Azure account, you do portal.azure.com. So this takes you to where you can put in your identity, your username and password. Now, it now depends on where your user account has been created. So when you try to log in, here you can use your Microsoft account, which is your personal account. Like if you have got a Gmail account or a Yahoo account that you have converted to a Microsoft account, if I put that one in here, it will take me to, I'm going to, you guys need to look at something. So this one will take me to my personal tenant, but don't worry, there's still a lot of things you will get. So I just want you to, so this is my Gmail account, which I've converted to a personal account. Please take a look at, when I'm trying to sign in, just take a look at the URL, and let's at least maybe you guys have an idea of what happened. So I'm going to use my Gmail account, and I'm going to click. So take a look at this. So this changed to login.live, which means that it's a personal account. These accounts, when we talk about personal accounts, they are email address that were not created, in the Azure environment, or they have not been created from the Microsoft environment, So when we create, our email address from an organization on Azure or in Microsoft, then that's going to be an organization email, like let's say I've joined a company called IT360NG. That IT360NG is an organization. If that organization have or has an Azure environment or Azure organization, then that email can actually be created from the Azure environment, which we will be seeing very soon when we start talking about the directory access and the security. So this is the personal account. It's a Microsoft account. We call those personal accounts Microsoft account. That's the same account for you that have access to the Microsoft Learn, or if you've been doing anything with Microsoft in the past, and you will have a Microsoft account. If you are using an organization account, you will notice that this is not going to change. It just shows that this is an organization account. But when you see login.live, it means that the user is using a personal account or a Microsoft account. But when you use an organization account, you 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 retain the same URL, which is the login.microsoftonline.com. But I will still explain everything one after the other when we get there. So I'm just going to log into this portal and show you how the Microsoft. No, I don't want to do this. Okay, let me just fix it. Right. So um, I'm logged on. This is how the Microsoft portal looks like, the Azure portal looks like. I'm going to expand this. So this shows, some of the services that we've got in Azure. There are a lot of services that you can create. If I click on this create resource, you will see all the services that you can create based on the categories, but at least some of the popular ones have, been pinned here, where you can see the virtual machine. You can create a virtual machine with any operating system, and one of the operating system that is very popular is, the Windows Server 2019 and Windows 11. Just the same way you have your normal laptop, and that's the same thing we have here. Then, the database, if you are creating a database, the web app, if you want to host your application, and a lot more. But if you check under each of these categories, you will see, if I go under compute, there are different, compute services. The only one we've talked about is the virtual machine. So we'll still talk about all these other, compute services, but you do not need to worry yourself about this for now. We'll get there. So I'm just showing you how, the Microsoft um, environment looks like, which is the Azure environment looks like. So I'm going to log out. And if you want to create your own, yes, which is the next thing I should be showing you. So I'm going to say, no, I don't want to. I want to forget this, really. Yeah, so you can create your own from here. When you type in the portal.azure.com, then you can click, create one. If you have a Microsoft account, if you have a Microsoft account, fine. If you do not have, you might need to get a new one. So if you don't have a Microsoft account and you try to create this is going to tell you this is not a Microsoft account. And so you might need to get a new one. If you have an Outlook account, that's by default a Microsoft account. Okay. You can also try to create your account using, I'm going to use a different, using sign in with GitHub, or if you want to sign in with your organization email, directly without. So there are different options. So regardless of how you want to do it. So that's about you creating your free account. For the free Azure account, free student account, we do not have access to that because, yes, you might think you are a student here, but it's more on, users in the universities. That's the free users account because it will be asked for some emails, which might be related to the university emails. And the last one is the Microsoft Sandbox, which we'll be using during the course, of this our training. The sandbox give you access, to the environment without even having to create an organization. So we give you access to perform some how can I put this? It gives you access to at least to perform some activities, in the Azure portal, without even having to create an organization. Like you want to create a services in Azure, a service in Azure, like the virtual machine in Azure, but it only gives you that access for a limited time. It might be for an hour, 2 hours, then it takes it up again. It wipes everything up again. So that's 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 the different type or different ways we can actually access the portal. However, we are not going to create our Azure free account now. That's for purpose, on purpose, in the sense that if you do that now, you will be asked to present a card, a debit card or a credit card. However, you will not be charged on that credit card. It's just to make sure that should you want to at least switch from the free subscription that have been assigned to you to a pay-as-you-go subscription. So that card will be used, to charge you. So for now, we are not going to create it, because if you create a free account now, it will only last for 30 days. That subscription will only last for 30 days. And we do not need that subscription now, since we have access to the sandbox environment. We'll still, I think in the next course, where we'll be talking about, the administrator course, then we'll be needing that subscription. We might be needing it if we do not have access to the sandbox. So at that time, we can create, that free account. But for now, our primary focus is going to be the learning sandbox that you can see here. So the walkthrough, like I said, is just for you to go to the portal.azure and create new, and from there you can just follow the steps. So if you need access to this, I can drop the email. I think I've got a video on my YouTube space where I've explained how to create this Azure free account step after the step by step. So you can take a look at that. I can add that to the group. So that's just the walkthrough. Like I said, we are not going to be creating any free environment now, because we want to keep that subscription for a while. So the next thing is, let's explore our sandbox environment. So I'm going to just show you guys how the sandbox environment looks like. I think I have to, oh no, okay. Give me a minute, please. I'm trying to bring that up. Yeah. So just give me a minute. I'm going to move this guy. All right, so I'll still send the link, I'll send the link to, so this is just for us to explore, the sandbox, how the sandbox looks like. So this is the sandbox. For every exercise that we'll be doing here, so you would have a page like this where you can actually sign in to activate your sandbox. So you'll be needing a Microsoft account to do that. So if you do not have a Microsoft account, this might be the time for you to get one. So if I click on this to activate my sandbox, it's going to tell me to sign in with a Microsoft account. So I'm going to use that same account. Okay. So this is just to show you, how the sandbox works. Do not worry about, the tags for now. We'll get there. Okay. So now, it needs permission. I'm just going to leave you. Okay, so you need to give it the permission to access that environment. Yes. Now it's creating, it's verifying my permission. I talked about the fact that yes, you can put in username and password, but that doesn't give you, that permission when I was talking about the authorization. So when we talk about authorization, we talk about permission. So it needs to, that identity that you're using, which is the username and password I've signed in with now, needs to be authorized before I can perform some specific activity. So just hold on. Okay, now you can see, like I said, the sandbox is time bound. We have 1 hour, and I have access to send 10 sandboxes for a day. So here you can see, so more sandbox tomorrow. If you consume the 10 today, by tomorrow you would have access to the 10 again. So can you mute your mic, please? Now that's how I've activated the sandbox. You can see here this Azure Cloud Shell. Do not worry about it. But let me see. I think okay, they asked me to talk about it. So yeah, these are some of the tools that we use in management. When we're talking about the cloud benefit, we talked about the manageability. Now, to manage our Azure environment, we need some tools. And the most common one is the GUI, which is the portal interface that I've showed you. When you log into the portal.azure.com, that's the GUI. That's what you can see. For now, do not worry yourself about the Azure Cloud Shell, or the PowerShell. These ones are tools that are used in automating, or when you want to automate that, when you want to automatically manage, your environment. You might want to learn about some of these tools like the PowerShell, the Azure Cloud Shell and the likes. But like I said, for now, do not worry yourself about this. I'm just going to go to the portal.azure and see, so when you activate your sandbox environment, you can now, later, please. You can now access, the environment. This will give you access to, the sandbox environment where, no, that's not. Okay. Yes, someone's expecting that. So if you go to subscriptions, you should have a sandbox subscription. You can see this is the concierge, subscription, and it gives you, access to a particular, based on the tasks that you are asked to do on that exercise. So majorly, our main focus is going to be on the GUI, which is going to be the portal. And maybe when we get to the Azure Administrator, we'll start learning more about the other tools like, the Azure CLI, the Bash. If you've encountered or if you've used Linux before, then the PowerShell also. So that's that. If you have any question, please do let me know. I know there might be a lot of information, coming out at this time, but this is just to familiarize you with some of the tools, some of the things we'll be talking about, later. Any question? All right, I'll take that as a no. So
Sorry, I have a question.
please do
Yeah, I
visit.
want to know the major difference between the Microsoft Sandbox and the because you said the Microsoft Sandbox is more like a free. Is it free that because you talked about
Yes, it's free.
giving 1 hour
It's
time limit?
yes, it's free. And that's why you do not need to create your organization. It's just for testing, it's
Mm,
just for learning.
okay.
Yeah,
Mm,
it's for learning, and that's why you are actually allocated, a time
mm,
for you to
mm,
access.
okay. All right. Okay.
Yes, Mr. Raji.
Please, are you going to share all this link where
Yeah,
you are?
sure. I've you see the link for, the I think I shared the link for the documentation. That's in there, but I'm going to share all the exercises, the link to each exercises one after the other. After each of the class, I'm going to share the link.
Okay, please, can you be sharing it both on WhatsApp and on Teams like this? It's
Okay.
much easier for us to pick it on Teams than WhatsApp.
Okay, that's fine. If you want to pick it on what Teams, but I'm going to share it on WhatsApp, after the class.
Okay, no problem. Thank you.
Okay, so that's you can pick it up from the Teams now, which I've shared now. So do not worry, there are too many information coming out, but we'll get there. So now let's talk about the Azure architectural component. This is so what are some of the things we'll be talking about? We'll talk about the Azure regions, the region pairs, the sovereign regions, which I've actually explained the last time. It might not be into details, but I've actually talked about it. When we talk about the data centers, the zone, we talked about the zone, then we talked about the region. I gave an example of, Nigeria, as a region, then Ghana as a region. Then the two, when you have the two, that's what we call a region pair. So the sovereign regions are regions that are restricted to the public. They are mainly for the government. Then we talked about the availability zones, which is the replication strategy that are actually in place to make sure your applications, your services, your files and folders are always available to you at any point in time. Even when Azure is saying our availability is 99.99, meaning in a year, your application, your files and folders might not be accessible for 14 hours in a year, which I've not seen, but they are saying we cannot give you a guarantee that your services will be available 100%, but we can guarantee you that your services will be available 99.99%, So the availability zones, are some of the strategies put in place to make sure your services are always available. And we talked about the Azure data centers, basically, where I related this to an IT environment and an IT room in your organization, where you have, some servers, as they call it, maybe some cables, you see all those patch panel, there will be AC in that particular place to make sure the cooling system, is top notch. Then that's the same thing, but more system, more servers now, more computers now. That's the same thing that we have in the so-called data centers for Azure. You know, um, I think there are some data centers, in Nigeria. When you talk about, the rack, is this organization, rack NG, yes. I think they've got data centers at Oregun or something. So this is the same thing. It's just the IT room, but now is more advanced because we have multiple servers that are actually hosting files, folders, application, for organizations. Then we'll describe what we call resource group. What's all this? We'll talk about subscriptions, management group, and the hierarchy for this. So I think we'll be able to finish up this one now. Then for the other ones, which is I think the compute type, the storage type identity, we might start talking about those ones tomorrow. So let's take a look at the architectural component. And so we'll start with the regions. I'm sure you guys at least have a basic understanding, of what the region is now. You know, just hold on. Now, so sorry. So we have regions. There are different regions. I gave an example of the fact that let's say we have a data center in Lagos, a data center in Ogun and a data center in Ondo, which makes of those 3 data centers, that collection of that 3 data centers is what we call a zone. So we have that zone, which is the southwest zone. Then we have the southeast zone, maybe a server in Anambra, a data center in Anambra, a data center in Imo, a data center in Enugu. That's the eastern zone. Then this combination of the zones makes up what we call a region. Now, that means Nigeria will be categorized as a region, or let's say we have southern Nigeria, or northern Nigeria, and we just want to say, yes, this part, the southern Nigeria is a region on its own, the northern Nigeria is a region on its own. Then the two will make up of what we call a region pair. That means when you deploy your files or services or application in the southern Nigeria, there will be another region where your services will be replicated to, automatically in the second region, so that when there is a downtime in one region, there will be a failover to the other region. So that is why you will see those regions are very close to each other. So regions are made up of one or more data centers in close proximity, and they provide flexibility and scale, region preserve. So we have different regions. We have just 2 regions in Africa now, which are the ones in South Africa. There's one in South Africa West, South Africa North. So these are all the regions that Azure currently have. Um, then we'll talk about the availability zones, where I said, within the region, within a particular region, we have different zones. Each zones contains their own data centers. So you can see this particular zone contains, different data centers. This zone contains 3 data centers. This zone contains different data centers, and all the zones make up of what we call the region. So that's why you see, physically separate data centers within the same region, each data centers. So that's just the basic example, the basic explanation of the availability zones. So this is also a replication strategy to make sure your services are always available. So when we say you deploy an application in our region, or that your Google Drive that stays on your system every time, that's the technology behind it. So that means in the whole Nigeria, if we have 17 data centers, your services will be deployed to all these data centers, depending on the replication strategies that you've put in place. Then it will now be deployed to another region, which have the same number of data centers. That means, let's say your application is now sitting on maybe 34 different data centers. And within that data centers, your application can even be on different servers. It just tells you that, the availability, when it comes to the cloud, is top notch. That means what we are saying is your system, your services, your files, folders, your application will always be available, except something unusual happens, and that's what's going on here. So the region peers, we talk about the region peers already. When we have a region, then another region, in close proximity, 300 miles separated from each other, to make sure that, when there is a downtime in a particular region, there will be a failover to another region, and that's what we call the region peers. Then the sovereign regions, which I said, these are not accessible to the public. These are basically for the government. Majorly, the sovereign regions are actually for the US and the Chinese, government. So they try to keep their services away from the public. And that particular regions are mainly for the government and for the government only. All right. So the walkthrough, let's explore some of the global infrastructures. So explore. I'm going to, you guys can take a look at that. Oh, so sorry. So sorry. Please give me a minute, please. Trying to. So I'm going to drop these also. It's just a walkthrough on the regions, where you will notice the data centers, the regions. So you can access these, just for you to explore, the regions. You can see the regions, the data centers, some of these things that we just explained. So you can skip the intro and try to explore the globe, try to know which one takes, take a tour. I've dropped it there. So I think you guys can do that. If you have any issue or anything, you can let me know. But that should be straightforward. So let's move on. Then we'll talk about the resources. And this, I think we should be able to have this concluded before the end of the class. Let me just check the number of slides that we have so that we don't rush this. Okay. I think we have just 5, so we should be good. Yes, we should be good. Now, the resources. We started talking about services. So what do we even mean by resources? So these services that we are talking about are actually the same thing as resources. Now, if I say I want to create a storage account is a resource. So let me explain this in a layman term. Let's forget the fact that we are in a class. Let's go back to Nigeria now. When you want to rent an apartment, or yes, an apartment in Nigeria, a 2-bedroom flat, a room, most of the houses that we have on there will not give you the benefit of furnished, or unfurnished. It always be 99% of those apartments are actually unfurnished. That means you will be the one to bring in your TV, your shares, your beddings, your clothes and everything. Those are things you need to function. Those are things that are peculiar to you. Now, because Shola have TV, he has a TV, he has an home theater, doesn't mean I'll be a fan of home theater. I can just have maybe a TV and a PlayStation 5. So those are my own resources. That's the same way, this is in Azure. Each organization have, the resources they feel will work for them. Each organization has resources that are actually peculiar to them. Each organization have the resources that are actually peculiar to them. So if we do not need a virtual machine, then we don't get a virtual machine. If Shola doesn't need a PlayStation 5, then he doesn't buy a PlayStation 5. That's a resource that I want. And those things. Oh, did I stop sharing? So sorry. Can you guys see now? Thank you so much. Thanks, Shola. Yeah. So now these are different resources: the virtual machine, the storage account, the app service. Like I said, depending on the organization need. That's the same way when you rent an apartment, you only bring what you own, which are your properties. So take that property as a resource in Azure. Those are things that you own. Those are things that works for you. So, and that's the same way we have it in Azure. So when you rent an apartment, you will be the one to bring your own resource to that particular apartment. So Azure only gives you, that apartment, that block area, that building. It's something you will get from Azure, you know. However, you will still need to bring your own resources to stay in that apartment. And that's the same thing that is happening in Azure. So we call something a subscription. That subscription is your buying power. That's the money, that you use in purchasing your properties. That's the same money here. Just think of, let's put it as money now. It's the same thing you will use to purchase your resources in Azure. So when you have a subscription, that's what you'll be charged on, and your subscription will have a particular amount allocated to it. Then you start, purchasing resources one after the other that are needed for your organization. But remember that Azure is a pay-as-you-go, consumption. Azure has a pay-as-you-go consumption model, meaning you will not be charged upfront. However, you'll be charged for the resources you've deployed. So you can decide to keep deploying any resources that you like. However, at the end of the month, you'll be charged, based on the resource that you've deployed. Now, there's something I want to talk about also is the resource group. So I talk about resources. I related this to, your properties. Now, when you are renting an apartment, there are some particular properties that are going to be in your bedroom. Some are going to be in your sitting room. Some are going to be in the kitchen. That means you've categorized them based on, the rooms in the building. That's the same thing we have in Azure. So we call it a resource group. That resource group says, okay, this particular, we just want to logically, separate our resources from each other. So I can create a resource group to say this resource group is going to be meant for the finance department. Then I'll create another resource group to say this is meant for the IT department, depending on how you want to segregate your resources in Azure. So that's what we have here. So you think of those services that we've been talking about as resources in Azure. But before you can get a resource, you need a subscription, and each resource must be deployed in a resource group. So just have that, understanding. So if I go back here, so we talked about resources which are like storage account, virtual machine, network, and the likes. Then this is the resource group I talked about. That is a container, to logically, separate your resources or aggregate your resource in a single unit. So you can have different subscriptions, and sorry, you can have different resource group. Your resource must at least exist in a particular resource group. You cannot have a resource in two different resource group at a time. It's the same way you cannot have, let's say you have two toilets in your apartment. You cannot have, a towel, in those two bedrooms at the same time. So your resource must be in one resource group at a time. But you can actually move your resources from one resource group to another. The same way you can move a resource group from one subscription if you have multiple subscription from one subscription to another. So you guys can take a look. Please make sure you follow that documentation. Try to understand some of the things I've been talking about also. So then we'll talk about the subscription, which I've actually explained. Like, when you create a subscription, an Azure subscription provides authentication and authorization access, meaning just look at it as, your buying power in Azure now that give you access to create resources. Just take it like that for now, So here you can see these are, some of the resources, and under these resources, then we'll start creating our resource group. So we'll talk about the hierarchy now. to see how these resources are actually created. And I think we can wrap it up. Okay, so yeah. So yeah, there's something we called, I was talking about the fact that you can move a resource from one resource group to another, but at least your resource must exist in a particular resource group. So I now said you can move your resource group from one subscription to another if you have multiple subscriptions. So how do we now manage all these subscriptions at a time? So we can have like a group, just like the way you have a resource group that holds or encapsulates all your resources. That's the same way we have what we call a management group that encapsulates all the subscriptions that you have. So you can categorize your subscriptions also if you have multiple subscriptions. So you can have multiple subscription under one management group. Why this is so, why we have this hierarchy is for you to easily manage your resources. So this is it. You can see we have management group. Then for management group, we have resources. Then resources, you have resource group. Then after the resource group, we have the resources. Meaning, I was saying authorization or permissions. If I want you to access this virtual machine, I will only give you access on this virtual machine. And when you log in to the portal, you will only have access to this virtual machine. But if I give you access on this resource group, that means you will have access to this virtual machine and this storage account. You understand? And this network. Because I've given you access on this resource group. It's just like in your building, if you say, guy, when you come into this apartment, multi-separated, only chair ni only access only on this chair is where you have access to. Please do not move to other part of the house because this is an Airbnb now. We cannot give you access to multiple, it's just for you to rest on the couch and leave. So that means you are not authorized to access the other part of the building. But if I say you have access to the whole living room, meaning you have access to the TV, the couch, any other thing in the living room, but you are not authorized, to access the kitchen, the bedroom, the toilet also. If I want to give you access to, the toilet, let's say we are, or yes, the toilet and the kitchen. So let's say we have all of them, in the living room where you can just open the door and move from, the kitchen to then I will say, yes, there's a resource group I've created. That means you have access to the, the kitchen, the toilet, and the living room, but you do not have access to the rooms. Then we've seen houses where they will block one part of the room, maybe with block and likes. But now I'm saying you have access to the whole house. That means you have access to the rooms in there, to the kitchen, to the toilet, to the living room. And that's the same thing that is going on here. If you give access to only the living room, which is a resource here, the person will only be able to access the virtual machine. But when you give access on this part, which is, let's say, maybe collections of this particular resource, you have access to all those resource at that particular time. Then when I give you an higher access, I want to give you access on the subscription itself. If I give you access on the subscription, that means all the resources and all the resource group under that particular subscription, you will have access to it. Then if I give you access on the management group, that means you have access to all the subscriptions in that tenant. You have access to all the resources and all the resource groups. And so that's the hierarchy. So it comes as the management group, the subscription, the resource group, then the resource itself. Any question before we go ahead and create our first resource group, our first resource, then we end it from there. All right, so I'm just going to create this. Let's see how to create our first resource group. sorry, our first resource, which is, let me see, hold on, please. Okay, so like I said, I'm going to drop all these labs one after the other. You guys can have access to that particular labs. So I'm going to let's see how to create this. Just the same way I've showed you guys this. I hope this guy is going to force me. I don't know. All right. I'm going to see if this guy doesn't force me to use the same tab. Okay, hold on. Okay, so we have the resource group. So what we are doing is we want to create a resource, and the resource we are trying to create now is a virtual machine, and we'll monitor the resource group. So this is the lab, and this lab explains what you need to do. So if you go step by step, you will understand what you need to do. The first thing is for us to create a virtual machine. But to create the virtual machine, we need to log into the Azure portal. We need to click on the resource, the compute, because a virtual machine is a compute type services. But we'll still talk about that. Then when you create any resource in Azure, there are different tabs. So we have the basic tab, the subscription type, depending on the tab. So these are informations we need to supply to the tab. On the tab, then we'll verify the resource that we've created. Then from there, we can clean it up. So let's quickly activate this. I'm just going to quickly activate this. Sign in. So from there, so I'm going to so just hold on, please. I know we're past our time. It's just for us to have this done. Then we can. Okay, so this is checking the sandbox for me. Sandbox have already been activated. Oh, okay. I might not really have the access because there is a sandbox currently running for a different exercise. But let's see. Okay, so I'm going to go to the portal. Okay, so I'm going to go to the portal. Okay, email.com. Sincere apologies, please. So the first thing, like I said, we need to log into the portal, which is what we currently have here. Then from there, for you to create a virtual machine, you need to click on the resource, click on resource here. Then you can go to compute, like this has said. Then you need to look for the virtual machine. But in case you don't see the virtual machine here, which is not feasible here until you click on more services in Azure. If I click on more services, this is going to give me all the services that we currently have in Azure. Okay, so from here, you can see the virtual machine. Here, you can click on create. However, you do not need to come this long route. You can always type in whatever you want to create here. And if I put in virtual machine, and this is going to take me to where the virtual machine is. Then from here, I can click on create from here or create from here, then create virtual machine. And from there, you can start following the steps, which is the basic tab. And this is what that is talking about. On the basic tab, this is what you need to do. The basic tab, the subscription is a concise subscription. You need to select a resource group that names begin with learn. So if I go back here and I would say, so sorry, what's going on? Yes, hold on, please. Hold on, please. Why are you? Can I have you? Okay, so um okay. This has gone. Okay. So you can fill up this information following, that information that you currently have on, the lab. Let me just go back and finish this up at once so that you guys can understand. Okay, so yeah. Okay, yeah. So I'm just going to share, the two at a time. Yeah. So yeah, this is telling us, to select the concierge. Then we need to select, the resource group that starts with the lane. Then you can put in the virtual machine name, which is, the VM, my VM, that's the name. So the region, you need to leave it as default. Availability options, leave it as default. Security type, leave it as default. Image, leave it as default. This is going to deploy an Ubuntu server for you. In case you don't know that's a Linux server. That same operating system your Android phone is using. So then here, the size, you can decide to select any size that you want. Currently, this is going to be an 8 gig RAM memory machine, two virtual CPU. Then, like, we talked about the fact that it's easily predictable, the price, the amount you are going to be paying. So you can see this is telling me that if I deploy this machine for 1 month, I'm going to be paying something close to $85 at the end of the month. However, if I turn that machine off every time I don't use it, then I will not pay up to that. But this is just telling you you might need to pay, this particular amount if you deploy this machine. And this is saying, um, same thing, username, what is it telling me? Password. It's asking me to select the password authentication type. Then I need to put, the Azure user as the authentication type. Then yeah, you can put in a, so sorry. I'm just going to quickly watch this. Same thing, same password, confirm your password. Then I've done that. Then public inbound rules, it's telling me to select none. Yes. Then click review this, click on review. There are other tabs also. One of the tab, which is the management tab that you might be interested in is, if you always want to auto shut down this machine, if I want to auto shut down this machine every 7 p.m., I want to take it off every 7 p.m. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, 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 you can see it.
Okay. Adewale, it looks like, you are the one. Shola, please, go ahead, please. Okay.
Sorry,
So,
raised in error.
you said?
My hands were raised in error. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. So, if I go back here, then I can click on create. It's going to review, what information I've supplied to this, This has passed validation, then I can go ahead to create, the machine, and that should create the machine. But I'm not sure it will create because of the fact that I was using the other sandbox, which might not give me that permission. But I think let's hold on. If I click on the deployment, let's see as it's deploying. Yeah, so you can see my machine is currently being deployed. You can see something like the network. Network is going to deploy a network first, which is the VNet, the IP. We'll still talk about all these things. So it will deploy the VNet first, then it now deploys the machine itself. Yes, this has deployed my machine. So if I go to resources, you can see the machine, the virtual machine I've, deployed.
Sorry, we're not seeing the exact screen. No, I've seen it Teams.
What? Why? What about now?
Yeah, now. Okay.
Yeah. I'm so sorry. What point did I lose this? All right, so this is my machine. It has been deployed, so you can see my machine. Like I said, this was the screen I was sharing before, where I was monitoring my deployment, the deployment details, like I said, it deployed all services related to the network first. As you can see, the machine, and when everything has been created, then to deploy the machine itself. And if I click on go to resource, it takes me to the machine that I've created. It gives it an IP address, for you to access it from anywhere, So you can start the machine, you can restart the machine, you can stop, you can connect, you can delete the machine. So you will see that this machine, if I click on the overview, you will see the resource group where the machine is deployed. The status of the machine is running, the location, which is the region, the subscription, what's the subscription ID, the size of the machine, what operating system, which network is this machine, deployed to, the IP address of this machine, which is the public IP address. You can see the private IP address. You can see the RAM, which is 8 gig, the size. So this is the same way, the same system that you have. However, this is virtual. This system has been deployed on another machine in a remote environment in a data center, but I can start making use of this machine. This is like the virtualization that we all know back in the day. So this brings up to the end of today's class. And if you have any question, we can talk about that. Tomorrow we'll start talking about the computer and the networking. Okay, before we go, let's look at just hold on. So I'm going to click on. Okay, just hold on. So I'm going to go back here. So at least if you do not have any question, I have a question for you guys. All right, so I need everyone to participate at this. How many resource group can a resource be in at the same time? You are going to. So any other person? How many resource group can we have a resource at the same time? Yeah. So what's the reason for this?
Can only be in the same time.
Because a resource cannot be in multiple resource group at the same time. Okay, so number 2, so we're going to click on one. So number 2 says, what happens to a resource within a particular resource group when an action or settings group level is applied? So, I explained the fact that when we have, there are hierarchies, when it comes to Azure, we'll talk about the resource group, and the subscription, the management. So this is asking what happens to the resources within a particular resource group when an action or setting at the resource group level is applied. Current resource inherits the settings, but the future resources don't. Future resources inherit the settings, but the current resources don't. The settings is applied to the current and the future. Let's just give this a try.
Settings
sure.
applied to current and future resources.
Yeah.
No.
David, what's your own answer?
Sorry, I thought it was supposed to be.
I like corned beef and sliced tea.
The current resources inherit the setting.
But the future don't?
Yeah.
So let me ask you a question. When you buy a TV, so you give somebody an Airbnb room, you understand?
Yeah.
And there is a bed there is a TV there, and the person start complaining, that those are when the person came in at that particular time, those are the resources in there at that particular time. And the person start complaining, it's too cold. and you go ahead to buy an heater from Amazon and you put it in that room, would that person have access to that resource?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's the same thing. So even if it's the current or the future, all that settings applies to, as a virtual machine. So the last one is what Azure features replicate resources across resources, across regions that are at least 300 miles away from each other.
Region
What?
Region peers.
Where are my other students? Nobody is talking. You guys are
So it's only creating
you want me to
Yeah,
you guys
region
want me
pair.
to start
Region
yeah. So the region peers, that's the resource. When we talk about replications, and when it is across region, not across zones now. So we'll talk about the region peers. So if you check those answers, we should have 100%, except if something else has changed.
Well, please, Oga.
I'm with you.
Yeah. Please, one question I want to ask is this. If I have a web application I want to deploy to Azure, is it that I'll have different payment for my application to go to multiple regions, or not? Or once I deploy, it's just limited, automatically limited to my region, or probably if I want it to go to other region, I have to pay more.
You need to pay. So that's why when we talk about, when we're creating our resource, when we're creating our resource, you can select availability zones. For regions, Azure automatically creates your resource in another region. But if you want more replication strategy, like within a particular region, you want it to be deployed to different availability zones, then within that particular availability zones, you want it to be deployed to different data centers. Yes, you need to pay for that. And that's the availability options. But for the regions, Azure automatically creates, your service to the next region, even when you do not select any availability option. Reason being that when there's a downtime in your region, Azure can fail over to the next region. Does that make sense?
Sorry, please, okay, I didn't get the last part. My network did somehow.
I
Please
don't
come again.
repeat things twice. You have to say.
Sorry.
So this is it. Azure automatically creates, that's why we have a region pair. So the fact that you've created your services in one region, Azure automatically creates, that same services in the other region for you as a backup. You understand?
Okay.
So that there will be a failover if there is a downtime, because they promised you an availability of 99.9. They do that for you. You do not have to pay. However, if there is a need for you in a particular region, so they are saying it might be in just one data center or in just one particular zones. But if you want more replication, they will now replicate to different data center, different zones, then different in each of those regions, it would now be different data centers, different zones, that particular. So those are the replication strategies. However, it might be in one data center, then there will be another clone of that services in another data center in another region, which your services will be switched to or fail over to when there's a downtime in that particular region. But the good thing is, in your particular data center, there are different racks of servers. So your services are actually deployed to different servers within a particular data center. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Okay.
Any other question before we call it a day? I know it's taking like 25 minutes of you guys. So.
Sorry, please. I thought you want to get a clarification or something. You said region pair before region pair can happen. The regions involved should have exactly the same number of data centers. Am I right?
No. I didn't mention that. So the fact that Nigeria have 25 data centers doesn't mean it will be the same number of data centers in Ghana. Do you understand? So,
Okay.
but the thing is, we categorize those data centers based on availability zones. So, region pair is just to make sure that anything you deploy in one particular region is replicated to the other region. It doesn't mean it's going to exist in multiple data centers just the same way it exists in your, within your particular region. So it's not all those regions that you can see, they do not have the same number of availability zones. They do not have the same number of data centers.
Okay. Okay.
Any other question before we call it a day? All right. Bye everyone.